Okay, so I wanted to go over how to finish up staging your this little funnel widget we've been working on. So first thing, let's rename this. So just pick it. You can name it over here by double clicking really lightly. You can name it here, or another place is you can name it over here on your modify panel. Now this is actually an exhaust reducer is really what this is. So let's go for that, rename that. Okay. All right, we need a little stage in here, so we're going to go to the top view and do Shift F and turn off my safe frame. We're going to create a plane, and we want something, something about like this. Let's go ahead and modify this, and let's make it square. So I'm going to go for 6 foot and put on both of these. And then we want to center it, so we're going to right click and go to our move, and we have X, Y, and Z down here. If we just right click on these little arrows, if we right click on those, they'll zero out, and that'll put it in the center of our world. Then I need to double check, go to the front view, so V for viewport front. Make sure my object is sitting on the ground. Looks like it's just a hair above it. So I'm going to move it down a little bit. Okay, that looks pretty good. Alt center mouse button to kind of tumble around. All right, let's make some materials for these. Max is really good that the first letter of whatever we want to do is the speed key. So material editor would be M. So I can bring that up. And, oops. It's a little smaller. Okay, and I want to make this a little smaller. All right, so we're going to always be using physical materials. So we pull a physical material in. This is going to be for our little ground plane. Okay, we'll just call this, call it whatever we want. We're going to call it base. It's the base that our object is on, and then we're just going to put it on our object. So you can pick your object and right click, assign, or you can grab this little out and drag over here and drop it on either way. And we're going to want this a little bit darker gray, so I'm just going to darken this a little bit, and then I'm going to copy this. And the reason I'm going to copy is because I'm going to put a preset in here. For whatever reason, they've got Max programmed that whenever you set a preset, it goes to purple. I don't know why, but it does. So we're going to go in here and get a satin paint for the ground plane. So we'll go there. And then, like I said, it makes it purple. So we'll just paste this gray back in here. And then that's our base. Now, by the way, our base here, we don't need these extra segments in here. So we're just going to zero those out. And so that material is set and ready to go. So let's bring another material out here. By the way, I can actually go from this material if I want to also. I can hold down the shift key and drag it over. I can go like that to make a new material, or I can drag in and make a new material. Okay, this is going to be our reducer. And I'm going to put that on our little widget. Okay, and we're going to use a preset for this. We're going to come down here and use matte aluminum for our, maybe a little metal. I'll explain more about these materials later and the settings and everything. We're just doing, a good place to always start is with a preset, and then you can alter the preset. So, okay, so I'm just going to move that out of my way. I want black for my plane. Okay, I'm going to call this base. This is our base. And I want a black wireframe. I don't want a smorgasbord of colors. All right, so now we need to frame this in. We're going to be rendering this. This is our hero. So we're going to go to a perspective view. If you click P on the keyboard, it'll switch to a perspective view. And then we'll want to frame this in. Now, we want to look through the actual camera. That's Shift F. That will frame in from the actual where it's going to be rendering. Now, the center mouse button is really good at scrolling it to zoom in, but when you're wanting to get a really accurate zoom, it's not very good with that. And your viewport tools are down here in the bottom right-hand corner. So if you go down there, the top row, the one on the left, okay, fourth one over, is zoom. You click on that, you click and hold down your left mouse button, and then it gives you a more sensitive zoom. I see people make the mistake all the time. They're zoom over here. It's zooming around wherever you put the zoom tool. So, and I'm using the center mouse button, and then I can rotate around a little bit if I want to. And I'm thinking, you know, something about like that's pretty good. Now what I'm trying to do is frame it. I want it as large as possible in the frame. And basically I want it centered. So I want this space at the top and this space down here the same. And I want the space on the left and the right. So I'm looking for something like this. Okay, that'll work pretty good. Now, we're going to put a light in here. So we want to, before we go to put the light in here, what we want to do is this perspective, we want to convert this to a camera. Now, a perspective view actually is a camera, but it's just a camera where we don't have any controls for the camera. So what we do is we convert the perspective to a camera by clicking Control C, and then when you do that, right up here where it says perspective, when I do that, you'll see it'll convert it. And it's going to come in and say it's a physical camera. Okay, I don't know why that took so long. Okay, so now it's a camera. So now what we're going to do is we're going to switch and we don't look at it from the top. So V for viewport, and then we're going to go to the top. Now you'll see our camera in here. Now your camera doesn't have to be where mine is. I mean, your camera may be over here. This is, we are looking down. So this is the back of the room. This is the front of the room, right side of the room, left side of the room. We just need to see if the camera is, so when we're placing our light in here. Now, we're not going to do great lighting, but we're going to do a decent lighting. So we're going to go to light. So you're on your create panel here, light, a free light. And then we're just going to go out here and click where we want to place the light. Okay, so I don't want the light right over it, so it creates a shadow right down below it. I want it a little bit in the front. And so I'm going to click, say, right about here. And I also don't want the light right in line with the camera, because then the shadows are going to the back, and you're actually, the shadows creating a graphic design. So if I put the light, say, over here, I'm lighting the front of it, and the shadow's going to go off to the side and create a nice little graphic element in here. All right, and now the thing is we want to set our lights, the properties of our lights. So we want to go over here to our modify panel, and then we can modify the settings on the light. Now, we're going to be staging using lights. We're going to be using realistic, believable lights, just like a light bulb in a room or a lamp. And so we have certain parameters that we're going to stay with. So you're going to want to normally have at least 2 panels over here when you're doing anything, because one panel, then you're scrolling up and down all the time. So usually at least 2 panels, and there may be sometimes we want 3 panels. By default, they make it a point light, and this is dictating what kind of shadow it's going to cast, okay? And a point light means light is coming from like a grain of sand, and light doesn't come that way. Light comes from a light bulb or a lamp, and so it actually has a shape, okay? And we have, if we click on this, we can pick different shapes in here. And really, you could use any of these. The only one we really don't ever want to use is point. For special effects, I might use a point, but for the most part, we never use that. For what we're doing right now, I'm just going to use a disc. Okay, so once we convert that to a disc, you'll see there's a disc out here. Now, I can set the radius of the disc. So if I click and hold down on these little arrows and move my mouse up and down, I can make the disc different sizes. The disc doesn't increase the intensity of the light, but it controls how sharp the edge of the shadows are. So the larger the disc, the softer the shadow. The smaller the disc, the sharper the shadows. I'm going to go with something maybe about like this, about a foot or something like that. Okay, now on color up here, intensity, color, attenuation up here, we always going to use Kelvin. Kelvin is a measure of temperature, how hot something is. And so like if you go to a hardware store or something like, Home Depot, and you buy a light bulb, on the side of it, it'll have a Kelvin rating. Okay. This defaults to 3600. I probably would never go under 3800, and that would be a very amber light, very warm light. Probably your range, a normal range, I would stay between 3800 for more of a warm light and 8000 for more of a cooler blue light. Neutral is 6600, which is what we're going to do right now. So we want to make this 6600. Then down here for intensity, it starts off at 1500, which is really bright. We want to go we'll do 150, and that's kind of like about 150 watt light bulb. It's not exactly right, but it's close to that. Now, when you made your light, you might have got a little arrow that comes out here, or it's a little warning. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go over here to my exposure control, which I already have on, and I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to turn this exposure control off. And I'm going to delete my light just to show you, because if you might have gotten this error. So as soon as I try to put a light in here, it's going to say, hey, do you want a photometric, exposure control? And the answer is yes. We do want an exposure control. This is kind of like on a camera, like a real camera, not like your iPhone cameras, but a real camera. You have a lens on it, and you have what's called a bellows in there, where you can adjust how much light is getting into the camera. Okay. And so we're going to make this like a real camera. So we're going to click yes. And then that's going to turn on your exposure control all by yourself. And then I can drop a free light in here. And then we'll be ready to go. Switch back to our disc again. Bigger, maybe something like that. Okay, now the other thing we got to do is we got to go to the front view, because when we make a light in Max, it puts the light on the ground. Okay. So we want to go to the front view, and we want to move the light up so it's up above it. Don't get it too close to it. We want it to be able, and we don't want it too far away. Something here is probably about fine. And then switch back to our camera view. Now, before we start rendering, we're going to go up here to our render menu here, rendering. And then we want to go into our exposure control. And then we're going to do a pre-render. So right here, just click pre-render, and it'll kind of show you what's going on. Now, we want to adjust this section here where it says physical camera exposure control. We really want to turn this off. And the reason we want to do that is what this does is it turns it on and links this to cameras. And so it means that every camera will have its own exposure control. So, if we had 4 cameras, we'd have to set the exposure 4 different times. So for normally, and in certain circumstances, we want to do that, but normally we just want to turn this off, and we just use a global exposure setting. As we go up with this, it's making our, it's letting less light in. As you go down, it's letting more light in. Okay. So we're going to go a little of exposure, so something around there. Is your number, don't just be copying my number, because you didn't place your light exactly the same place. So what we're looking at is our little render there. Okay. Something like that, so we get some good lighting. Now what we're going to do is go up to Arnold, and we're going to bring in the Arnold render view. And we're doing this because it's an interactive viewer, and I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. So something like this. And we're going to be doing test renders. When we first want to do this, we want to kind of make them smaller. So we're going to go to this this view menu, go to test resolution and go 50%. And then I'm going to click, this is my render button. And when I turn this on, it's a interactive render. So as I make changes to any settings in my scene, this will update. Okay. And so now you'll see that we're, getting a little render. Now, this is a low quality render. It'll be kind of grainy. That's okay, because when we're setting things like textures and lighting, we don't need it to be a really smooth render. We just want to do it pretty quick. And so now you'll see we got a nice light coming in from the source from the left, shadows off to the right, and this is looking pretty good. Now, if we come over here and we choose our light and we go to our modify panel, then we can come over here and we can start modifying the light. Okay, and we can see things like if we came in here and we changed the settings on the light. So here's warm. You'll see this shift to a warm, and I said don't ever go over maybe about 8,000. If we go 8,000 here, you'll see it's more of a blue light. Before what we're doing right now, when we're usually doing your materials, you want your light neutral, and so 6600 is white would be okay. Okay, so I don't know why this reverted back. Okay, so I changed it back to my 150, and you'll see it's kind of dark. So let's go back into my exposure control again. And as I lower this, you'll see it adding light back into this. Okay, that's fine. All right, let's play with some materials now. So I got my material editor here, and we're going to play with what's on the base, on the ground. You can play with the color on your reducer. It's a metal. Okay, if you go in here and start playing with the color, you know, you're going to add some color to the metal. Okay, right now we're just experimenting, and when you're making these colors in here, then you're making some fake kind of metal, because metals have specific properties to them, and I'll give you a chart that'll tell you, well, if it's gold, it needs to be these kind of settings, you know, what the color is and such. So for the most part, you know, metal doesn't have a lot of color in it. It's very sensitive. Okay, so even if we want to go with a bluer, it doesn't take much to tint it. Other aspects that you can play with this also is how reflective it is. Okay, so this is the roughness setting. So when this roughness is set to 0, so if I right click on it and 0, then this is highly, highly reflective. And the reason it's getting so dark is because we don't have anything in our background, so it's reflecting black in the background, and so that's why it's so dark. But if I start adding a little bit of roughness where the light is hitting it and bouncing off of it, then you can still make it be really nice and shiny, but it'll distribute the light as it bounces off of it. Okay, and you can play with that. Okay, so on the ground, what we're going to do is put a pattern on the ground. Now, Max has what's called procedural textures. Okay, so these are patterns that are generated through a mathematical algorithm. So we're going to right click in the background, and basically the way you can think of things is we have materials. These are materials that we put on things. There's different ones. We're using physical material. Arnold, which is the renderer we're using, it has all kinds of different ones for it too, but we're going to be using the physical material. One of the benefits of the physical material is it's universal. So if we change what the renderer is, so if we don't use Arnold, we use other renders. There's third-party renders. You might go to work for some places. If you're doing architecture, they use V-Ray, and you can use physical materials with those. But then we go to maps, and maps are what we plug into the materials to alter the materials. And really you have three areas, forget the environment one, but you have OSL, General, and Arnold. So Arnold, these are all the ones that Arnold ships with it. These all kinds of nodes to alter things. OSL is a pretty cool one because that's a universal shading language, which means that these maps would exist in other softwares. So these are in Max, but if you were in Maya, you would have them in there too. It's a universal. But we're just going to go with Max's default ones, which is General. So we're going to need two things in here. The first thing we're going to do is come down here and get a splat. Okay, and basically this is a material that creates a kind of a splat pattern, kind of a paint splat pattern. Okay. Now we're going to use this as a mask, so we don't really want color in it. So what we want is it to be white and black. So over on your controls here, if you click on this little color swatch here, I want to make this white. Okay, click OK, and then make this one black. Okay, and we're doing that because we're going to use it as a mask, and so we'll bake in color a different way. So initially what we're going to be doing is using this as a bump map. So we're going to a bump gives the object the illusion of depth. And so we're going to go in here and click it into the bump node. And by default, the bump in Max is not very prominent. Okay. So we're going to click on it. We're going to go down here and change its settings. You can go from 0 to 10. We're just going to go 6, not 0.6, but 6. And then you'll see some patterns starting to come out here. Now, we want to go back to this splat node. And by default, it's a pretty big pattern. Okay, that's set at 101.6. Let's do something around 20. It doesn't have to be 20, you know. And the other thing you can do is you can move the pattern around. Okay, so we have offsets here. So if I click on the Y and I click and hold down, I can move the pattern. Y is moving it left and right, and X is, I'm sorry, Y is forward and backward, and X is left and right. So you can actually move where these little dots are. Okay. So we want something kind of like this. We're just kind of putting a pattern in there. And the other thing that you can do also is you'll see that this is making little divots in here. Okay. So if you go back to your base material here, and I put a minus in front of this 6, put a minus and hit enter, then it's going to make them as nodes that pop up. So you can make it pop up or make it go in. Okay. For what I'm doing, I'm going to make it go in. So I'm going to take that minus out of there, but we have options. All right. Then we're going to put some color down here. So we're going to get another map. So we're going to right click and we're going to go to maps. And we're going to use general again, and we're going to use a mix, okay, a mix node. A mix node allows me to mix between two colors. So on our base, I'm going to go back over here, and I'm going to right click and copy this color again. And then on our mix, I'm going to paste it in the bottom. And so now with this mix, if I if I go and drag this, put it in base color, okay. And as a matter of fact, I need to swap this. Yeah, I did it wrong. The gray needed to be in the top. So now when I put this in here, we're not going to see it doing anything because we have no way to start mixing colors. So what we're going to do is put a color down here in the bottom. Now, really, you know, you could make this any way you want. I'm going to do it kind of like it's a kind of a dirty color, you know, almost like there's some dirt down inside of those crevices, okay, those little divots. So something about like that is what I'm doing. And now what we're going to do is, this is one of the beauties of a node-based system, is I can use the same node to drive this. So we have a mix amount, how much, which is going to control this. So when I put this in here, it's going to control that. And now it's going to be the opposite of what I want. Okay, and so what I'm going to do right here is click swap, and now it's going to have my gray material on the top, and then that's down in the crevices, and there we go. So now you're starting to learn. By the way, how I got this big is if you double click on the little swatch, then it'll come up bigger. Double click on it, it'll go down smaller. And so this is kind of how we manipulate our materials. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. All right, so now what we want to do is to re-render this. So now we want it to be full resolution. So come back to 100 and let it render. It'll take a few minutes because we're doing a higher resolution. And you can see in the bottom right hand corner, it's telling you how long it's taken to render here. All right, and I'm going to pause my recording while it's rendering. Okay, so there it is rendered. And now you're going to want to save this rendering to put up in our in Brightspace. So we'll just go File, Save Image. And then you'll give it a name and save it. And then you'll want to turn this file in. So after you save it, you'll want to save it first. Okay. Then what you're going to want to do is go File, Archive. And this will make a zip file that will have all of the folders and all the information that I need, and then you save it. Be sure, and I see people not doing this, put your name on your work. So in other words, I would call this Michael Booty underscore, and then this is the exhaust reducer. So you putting your name in it, and then you're putting what the project is, and then you save that. Okay. All right, so here we are at Brightspace. So in Brightspace, we're doing the exhaust render. So then you would click right here, and you would hit reply, and then you would, type something in here. It's my awesome, exhaust reducer, and then you're going to put your image in here. You click the image button here from my computer, and then you load your image in. Make sure that the image you load in has your name on it, that it's named. I see a lot of people not naming their pieces. Okay, as a matter of fact, let's go in here, down here. Okay, so here's one Chase is done, and you can see he did not name his picture. Okay, so it should have his name on it. Everything that you do, put your name on it. Okay. All right, and that's pretty much how you do it. Okay, hopefully this helped you guys. Thank you very much.